Hey folks, Fernando doing another video for Modern Survivalists. Stick around for this video. It's quite interesting, I think, and it's about the 1949 mounted rifleman's knife. And this is in fact the reproduction of said knife, because if you want to get one of the original babies, only 1,000 of those were made. Those cost about $5,000 to $10,000 US, depending on the auction you get in and the condition the knife is. But for just maybe about $150, give or take, you can get this, the replica made by Cold Steel. It's actually made in India by some other manufacturer working for Cold Steel. Cold Steel usually does a great job in outsourcing these things and getting people to get a good job. And in India, they make decent knives. It's a quite accurate replica. It's very close, really, to the original item in terms of weight, size, dimensions. A 12-inch blade, huge knife, heavy. The wood is actually better than the original thing, although the construction is not quite the same. The original Ames mounted rifleman's knife was actually two slabs put together enclosing the tang. Here you have just one piece. It's beautiful wood. This is actually rosewood, fantastically nice wood, but you clearly see that it's just one single piece, and apparently this has been drilled through, and you have the tang going in, and you have a few pins. I'd love to see an X-ray to see, but I'm pretty sure that knowing Cold Steel and the kind of people they end up working with, they did a decent job. Especially in India, they make kind of utilitarian stuff. They know that it's not so much, especially for good manufacturers over there, they know that those knives are going to be used quite a bit, and they're no wall hangers. No. So if you want to get the knife, I'll leave the link below for you to guys get it in Amazon, depending if it's available. I'll also leave the links for my books, Street Survival Skills and the More Survival Manual, if you like my take on survival and preparedness and my experience in Argentina and some of my advice for kind of modern survivalism and stuff relating to things out there in the streets these days. Links are going to be there below. Talking about the links below and talking about pricing. This is fantastic. Listen to this. The knife made by Ames, and I'm going to be talking about the history of this knife based on this article that I came across. Fantastic article from Man at Arms by James Hutchins. And yes, you'll have the link there to read if you want to learn more about this. Ames originally priced the knife at $4 silver dollars, seated Liberty back in the day. Now this is the coin that replaced that seated Liberty, but it's the exact same amount of silver in the coin. It's actually the same size of coin as well. So 4 of these coins bought you this knife back in the day. How much silver is this? About $25. Yes, the price in silver of this knife, guys, it's the same in 2021 as it was in 1849. So when we talk in terms of survival, preparedness, all of this economic stuff, when we talk about the importance of precious metals, this is what we mean. It just holds on. Time passes, goes by, and the same amount of silver and gold pretty much buy you about the same kind of stuff. I just thought that was very interesting that 4 of these coins, at least in terms of the metal content, buy you this same knife. Not the exact same knife, because as I said, at auction, $5,000-$10,000, but something that's a reproduction using somewhat of the same resources and such. Yes, I want to insist on how beautiful the blade is. It is just if you want to get a historically accurate piece, it's just, I would say go for it. If you're in the least interested in this kind of knife, you want a big knife like this, and maybe even use it. It's going to be heavy. We're going to be talking about this in a second. So it is a bit of a heavy knife. 12-inch blade. I think it's almost 2 inches across. Well, not quite so. 4 centimeters across. 30 centimeters long blade. And about 5 or 6 millimeters thick, the blade itself. So it's a pound and 4 ounces. It's kind of a heavy knife, almost over half a kilo of weight. That was one of the things that worked against it, as we're going to be talking about in a second. But it's one of those knives that, thousands of these were made, and these were the first issued knives for the US military. That is super cool. The steel in the reproduction, this is 1085 steel, quite a nice, traditional carbon steel, and it gets the job done okay enough. It didn't come super sharp. I've seen some of these, some more reviews that came even, with a nice edge. This one wasn't exactly. I had to work on it a little bit myself, so I did a bit of my own sharpening here, and it's okay. It's fine. I'm gonna be sharpening it a little bit better, but right now, yeah, it is cutting paper nicely. But I've seen some that were, quite a bit better in terms of that department. It didn't quite meet the edge. No big deal, especially for this kind of item. And then you have brass. Anyway, fantastic, solid knife. Now, talking about the knife a bit more. This is a knife that was created for the Mountain Riflemen, created a unit, a regiment created in 1846. And the idea was for this regiment to protect the migrants going west in the newly acquired Oregon Territory, right? So these frontiersmen were going to be going west, and they were going to be providing the protection against the Indians, and kind of policing these people as well, protecting them among themselves and such. But they never got to do that right away. They first ended up going to the south, fighting in Mexico, because this is a war that was just getting started. So instead of going west as planned, they ended up going to Mexico. But even before that, Percival F. Smith, the commander of the regiment, wanted a knife for his men. He said that it should be equipped with a short percussive lock rifle. Of course, riflemen had a rifle, a hunting knife, and a saber. And of course, a handgun of some sort. He ended up talking about a Colt pistol, which was something that was gaining more and more reputation, and he had heard about it and wanted one of those for his men. But before any of that happened, he ends up going south, fighting in the Mexican War, becoming those brave rifles, as the quote says, and doing that without the actual knife. But he still had the knife in mind when he came back to US. They ended up regrouping. They had people not showing up, and that took a bit more time. Some desertion going on there. Colonel Talcott, though, agreed at once to furnish 1,000 knives. What was more, he indicated that, if at all possible, at least 800 of them would be in the hands of the regiment by the time they set out for Oregon. That didn't end up happening, though. It didn't reach in time. But you have the letter, which is quite interesting. And there's conversations here in letters going back and forth about getting one of the Bowie order knife. They were already talking about a Bowie knife that they wanted for their men. And keep in mind that the sandbar fights took place in 1827. James Bowie got involved in that fight. He was, it was actually a duel, but there was a skirmish there going on, and he ended up using the Bowie knife to defend himself, killed a guy, wounded another. But by 1835, Bowie was kind of a brand name. Everyone wanted a Bowie knife. What was a Bowie knife? Was it just what people associate today with a Bowie knife, which is going to be something like kind of like this? Well, no. In those days, Bowie knife was basically a bunch of different knives, were basically big knives. You had the resin Bowie with a straight Mediterranean type of edge. You had the spear point Bowie knife, something like this. And these guys were already talking about getting a Bowie knife. And in the letter that Talcott sends to Ames, he says, it has been decided to furnish the regiment of mountain riflemen with knives to be used for various purposes, cutting bush and vines, as well as a weapon of defense in personal encounters. Herewith is a sketch of such a knife as may probably answer the purpose. The blade is perhaps too thick. The handle should be of bone with a hole near the end and strong riveted to the shank. A leather scabbard is also required. let Mr. Ames make 2 or 3 for samples, adding any improvements that strikes you, and if they can be sent here shortly on approval, an order may be given him for 1,000. The cost should be stated. So the cost, as I said, was $4 silver. And they end up sending 3 prototypes. One of those is approved, and this is the one that ends up getting approved. But they end up leaving for Oregon before the entire order arrived. So only 2 companies end up having the knife. About 200 of those knives end up in the hands of the actual riflemen, and 1/5 of those guys have the knives. The rest of those knives just don't arrive in time for being used by them. And here's where it starts a series of events where the knives are in one place, they are going west, and things don't go as well as expected. They encounter a number of problems. First of all, they were going west in a trail that was very much used by the migrants going west, and they were eating up all the grass on the side of the roads and such, and they didn't have enough food for their horses, so they have to move further away so as to get grass for them, and this made things slower. There was also desertion. There will also people that were deserting the regiment as time went by. The frontiersmen, the ones going west, did not like the mountain riflemen all that much because they were there to protect them from the Indians, but at the same time they were kind of policing them, and they were considered to be hard-handed at times. Keep in mind, these were already veteran soldiers that had fought in the South and Mexican War, so they were not exactly as well suited for the policing job that they may have find themselves in at times. So a number of things were not going all that well. To make things even worse, there was the gold rush, and all of a sudden rumors of there's gold over there in California, we're going to be going over there. 100 men at a time took off and said, okay, we're leaving, we're going after that gold ourselves, and it was a series of unfortunate events, to say the least. But the company, the mountain riflemen, went on, they got reinforcements and such, but Smith always wanted the knives for his men, even though they just didn't get them in time, and only company E and C had the knife, and some colonels did not think it was all that useful. It's quite interesting to read this and see all the military stuff going on, some of the bureaucracy, some of the tactics, or even the philosophy even of a company that they wanted. Some of these colonels thought that this had no place in a modern regiment of riflemen that were going to be fighting when they dismounted using their rifles and their Colt revolvers, and they didn't need a big fighting knife. Some of these more old school type of guys wanted a saber, which they never actually got, I believe, and they were insisting that instead of this stupid big heavy knife, we need a saber because this had been used by some other soldiers, defeating quite twice the number of Indians because of the saber, fighting from the horse. Hey, but we're not we're not fighting from horses. We're riflemen that use the horse to move, and then we dismount so as to actually fight. And then at the same time, you had guys that were very much adamant about this being a fantastic utility tool, and at times a fantastic weapon for self-defense. And when some of these inspections were going on, yes, and you see several mentions of it being a Bowie knife, a large Bowie knife. Super interesting stuff. I suggest you read it. At a time they were in Texas and they were being inspected. C and D Ware said in this final report, the only companies the Mountain Rifle Regiment so equipped. And Lieutenant Colonel Loring in Texas said it was a formidable and useful weapon, and it would be well to use. It would be well to issue them to the other companies. So he wanted these issued to the rest of the companies. That didn't end up happening. These ended up in different armories, and at times were issued in different numbers or just were disappearing. At that time, it was sold at auction. 50 of these were sold in auction for 50 cents each. I bet that guy, if his descendants still have some of those, would be very happy. given that they cost like $5,000-10,000, especially in good condition. So yeah, that's the story of this knife, and I think it's quite interesting to see how some people loved it, some people hated it. I have no doubt that some soldier must have used this for building shelter or getting something done that no other smaller knife would have been capable of, and he pretty much was fond of his knife, right? And some other guy used it for self-defense, stabbed an Indian with it, and man, it is a beast of a blade. This was super effective. I love it. And someone else that didn't use it was just dragging it throughout the plains and bitching about, this is a super heavy knife, I don't need this crap. Maybe traded it, sold it, or just threw it away and just went off its way. Some of these gold miners ended up with these because they had deserted from the regiment themselves. So these were, limited number, 1,000 of these, but definitely some people loved them, some people hated them. My take on this, it's a great knife, guys. I'm super happy with the purchase. My advice, if I was back in 1894, would have been, make this a little bit thinner. You don't need such a thick stock. Make it maybe a little bit shorter, or actually give it a try of making it. Give me a couple of versions. Give me one that's a little bit shorter, right? And give me one that's a bit of a thinner stock, because short machete type of blade, that would have been super handy, and the lightweight, which have been much appreciated. Even faster, when you wield it, it just feels a bit too heavy, especially for someone that is tired fighting. You want something lightweight, and history proves this by, when you check out the evolution of the military utility knife. This is fantastic. This is the first knife issued by the US military. It's also the first knife that was in its conception as a utility fighting knife. And if that rings a bell, this is the 1942 utility fighting knife, the beloved K-bar knife. But look at the dimensions. All of a sudden, you're no longer going along the Oregon Trail, like across the Great Plains. Sure, you were out there in the frontiersman type of knife. Frontiermen used these type of larger blades. Maybe not as heavy as this one, just, pound and 4 ounces. This is a super heavy knife, but as technology advances, warfare changes, more firepower, gonna be using more bullets for killing, not so much large blades, and soldiers want to go with a lighter knife. This is a fantastic fighting utility knife, the K-bar. But one of the things that it has going for it, it is lightweight. It is something that the soldier feels he can carry around without breaking his back. And as you see the continuous evolution of this, you get to this point, which I think that at this point, the go-to military modern utility fighting blade would be the Glock, something that is extremely lightweight, the ultimate minimalistic version of a fighting utility knife, just enough blade to stab someone and fight with it, enough blade to open whatever needs to open, and a little bit of leverage here and there, but light, strong but lightweight. And this is probably maybe one of the final, or at least current, evolutions of the military fighting utility knife. Folks, I hope you enjoyed this little presentation of mine. I suggest you check it out. If you're interested, really get the knife. As long as it's being made, it's a great knife to have for any collector or any knife enthusiast. If you like my take on survival and preparedness, books, Street Survival Skills, and the Modern Survival Manual, links are going to be all there below. And subscribe to the channel as well if you like the kind of content I create here. See you on our next video. Have an awesome day. Take care.